Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Teardown. Today we're going to be doing a quick teardown of the FANTECH Aria V1. FANTECH was actually kind enough to send out the Aria and the Helios X5D when I reviewed the Helios 2 Pro S. Now unfortunately, while I really do like this mouse, I won't be able to do a full review on this mouse just due to some time constraints, but I figured it would be a good thing to make at least a teardown guide for this mouse because I have a feeling people are probably going to be maining this mouse for quite a while because it is actually a very good mouse, so I figured it'd be a good time to make a guide to show you how to service this mouse yourself. Now before we get into it, as always, you will need a couple things for your teardown. A precision set of screwdrivers will make this significantly easier. You could get away with just one size, but it's best to have some smaller bits for these smaller screws inside here. Something to keep track of your screws would also be highly recommended. I like to use an ice cube tray, but you can use pretty much whatever you want. And of course, a microfiber cloth to help keep the mouse stationary while you do your teardown is also highly advised. But once you have all your tools, you are ready to go, so let's go ahead and tear down the FANTECH Aria V1. Now the first thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to flip the Aria over and remove the base skates. Now I already have done so on my unit, but if you do need to remove your stock skates and you actually do like them, the Aria does come with an extra set, which is great to see. And of course there are skate removal ramps on the bottom of this mouse, which does make removing these very, very easy. So first off, once you get the skates off, you're going to go ahead and remove the 4-axis screws on the bottom of the mouse. And then once that's done, you can go ahead and remove the back magnetic shell. We'll put that off to the side for now. And what you can do is you can just kind of get your finger in between this lip here and pull down and run your finger along the side of this mouse to disconnect the clip here, and do the same thing on this side running along the bottom, and it just popped right off just like that. Now just be careful because there is a ribbon cable running along the side of the unit here, so go ahead, take your fingernails and just kind of pull up on this little piece here just like that, and then just shimmy this cable out and it will disconnect, and then there you go, you can separate the top and the bottom shells. So let's go ahead and put the bottom shell off to the side for now, and let's talk about the top shell first. Now in terms of the top shell, there really isn't too much going on here. It is actually a pretty straightforward shell design here. The first thing we can do is remove the side button PCB, so we'll go ahead and remove these 2 screws first. Alrighty, and then with that screw removed, we can just grab the side of this PCB, pull up and pull out at an angle, and we can remove the side button PCB. So here we have a clip connector on this side, which makes it very easy to replace this cable if something does break on it, which is great to see. And we also have 2 1-0 white shell switches for the side buttons, the common switch we see for most side buttons nowadays. We'll put this off to the side for now. And then next up, we can also remove our side buttons here. So as per usual, just go ahead, put your fingers on the side of the mouse, push them in like this, and then see this tiny little lip here and here. You just want to get your fingernail underneath and pull up. Same on this side, and your side clicks will pop off just like that. Very, very easy to remove as usual for side clicks. Now we can also remove the main clicks. Now the main clicks are installed a little differently here because they're actually clipped into the top shell here instead of being screwed in, and they're on this kind of peg-like connector, kind of similar to what we saw with the Pontage Stormbreaker's main clicks. So how we can remove these is we can flip the shell over, and just taking your thumbs, you can unclip these 2 connectors on the bottom here, and that will cause the clicks to pop off like that. And then you can just kind of take the clicks and lift them up and push them forward so they unhook from their stabilizers up at the top there, and the main clicks come off just in one piece like this. Definitely a unique way of installing your main clicks with clips like this, and again, very similar to the Pontage Stormbreaker in terms of how this is actually installed. But regardless, the clicks do feel really good in this unit, so at least it worked pretty well. I was worried about these feeling a little flimsy, but they actually feel quite good. So props to FANTECH there. Despite this being a little bit of a flimsier installation, these main clicks actually work very well. And that's pretty much everything else for the top shell. There isn't really anything else we can do with that, so I'm going to go put this off to the side as well. All right, now next up we have the base here. Now before we go ahead and remove anything, we're actually going to go ahead and disconnect the battery first. So to do so, just like always, we just take 2 fingers and just pull on the sides of this little connector here and just pull up. And with a little bit of fidgeting, you'll be able to disconnect the battery. You'll find out why we're going to do this in a moment. And then next up, we can go ahead and remove these 3 screws. And then now we can go ahead and remove the battery cage here, which is actually very easy to do so. The battery is just stuck into the top by a little bit of adhesive, so it's very easy to swap the battery or mod the battery into a larger size. Like I have a 600 milliamp hour battery here. You could totally put in a larger battery into this unit, which is nice to see. Of course, that will increase the weight, but having a larger cutout for a bigger battery is very cool to see. So props to FANTECH there. That's a really cool thing to see. We'll go ahead and put this battery cage off to the side. And then now that the battery cage is off, we can actually just pull the mainboard out of the unit because the screws we took out on the battery cage are also the same ones that are holding in the mainboard. So we can just grab by the side and just pull the board right out of the unit just like this. We can also take out the scroll wheel by just gently pulling to the side and popping it out of its holder. So that is pretty much everything for the mainboard there. I'll put that off to the side in a moment. We'll talk more about that in a second. Now, just a heads up, these buttons on the bottom will almost certainly fall out at some point during repair. So just go ahead and take these out and leave these off to the side for now. We will put those back in later. Now, in terms of the main board itself, we have our Pixar 3395 DMT6QU main sensor. We also have a very unique MCU in this Compex MCU. I've never seen a Compex MCU before in a mouse. This is definitely a bit of a unique MCU. We have our Wano blue shell pink dot buttons for the main buttons here. We have a Wano blue dot for the scroll wheel click. And then we also have a TTC 12 or 13 millimeter encoder. I can't quite make it out because this is covering it, but I believe it's 12 or 13 millimeter encoder. Again, a pretty basic board, definitely a very unique MCU here, but again, the mouse performs fine despite this unique MCU. All right, now in terms of the individual component weights, let's go ahead and weigh the base with these extra buttons. That is weighing in at around 9.15 grams. The top shell clicks are weighing in at 5.04 grams. The top shell is weighing in at 13.92 grams. The removable top shell base is weighing in at 5.29 grams. Again, there is the honeycomb base shell, which will probably be more around like 3 to 4 grams, but again, interchanging this will only slightly change the weight. The main board itself weighs in at around 11.17 grams. The side button PCB weighs in at 2.61 grams. The side buttons themselves weigh in at a gram. The battery cage and 300 milliamp hour battery weighs in at 8.21 grams. And the scroll wheel weighs in at 2.91 grams. And then all the miscellaneous screws inside the Aria weigh in at 1.25 grams. All right, now that we've weighed all the individual components of the Aria V1 here, let's go ahead and start our reassembly process. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put back in these base buttons here. Now these two side buttons here that are textured will just go into the bottom of the shell, and you can just put them into the left and right here. And then this central slider button here, you want to put it into the shell where this little square is pointing downwards. So you want to put it into the shell just like this. Now the positioning of this piece is going to matter, but I will talk about that in a moment. And then next up, we can go ahead and put back in our scroll wheel. Very easy to do so. You just want to put the short end or the thin end of the scroll wheel into the hole in the encoder here. Line it up and just push it in slightly. Don't push it in all the way because there is a standoff here on the board. So I would just leave a little bit of space on the side just so the plastic can actually properly make contact with the side there. Now, in regards to this bottom button, this is where things get a little tricky. Now, on the bottom here, there is a control switch that turns the unit on and off. Now, what you need to do is you need to correspond this switch to the positioning of this here. So what I would do is I would put it all the way to the left, and then on the board, I would flip this switch all the way over to the left or your right if you're holding it this way, just like this, making sure this switch is all the way to the left, and the same with the bottom button here. We can go ahead and put this back on. Now, all we have to do is literally just drop the board on top here. You can kind of use these standoffs at the bottom to guide you. Now, one issue you may have is you may go to put the board down, you notice it's not going down all the way. That is because the scroll wheel standoff here is preventing this. So if your board isn't going down, just pull the scroll wheel out a little bit and just make sure it sits flush, and that should allow the board to sit down. And then on the back here, just press down here. It may take a little bit of fidgeting to get this lined up at the back. Don't force it down. It should just naturally sit down, but with a little bit of shimmying, you should be able to get the board to go down just like that. Now, before you move on, I'd recommend putting your finger on top, flipping this unit over, and making sure this switch on the bottom still works. Just double check and verify it is still functional before you move forward. Again, if this is misaligned, you will not be able to turn your unit on, so to be very, very, very careful with this. And then now we're going to do something a little weird that we don't normally do here. We're actually going to go ahead and put the side button PCB in first. Now, the reason for this is that this cage is quite big, and it makes getting this cable pretty much impossible once it's installed, so we're going to have to go ahead and put this in early. Now, this can be a little difficult seeing as the board is just kind of floating here. So just to make this process a little easier, what I recommend doing is just putting a screw into the board. It doesn't really matter where, just put a screw in somewhere, just like this. Don't screw it all the way down because you will break the hole, but just have it roughly installed like that just to keep the board in place while you do this. So next up, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and pull this connector into the open position like this, and then just take this blue cable and feed it into this connector as best as you can. Sometimes this will pop open, which will prevent it from going in, so just be very gentle and just slowly push it in. There you go, just like that. So then once it's in, you want to go over, flip this unit over. You want to make sure this ribbon cable is sitting even here to the rest of the board. If it's uneven, it will cause issues with your side button, so make sure it's even. And once it's roughly even, just take your fingernail, clip down, and that will lock that into place. We'll put this off to the side just like this for now, and then we're going to go ahead and remove this screw we put in earlier to hold the board down. And then we're going to go ahead and put back in this battery cage. So the battery cage's little holes here, here, and here will correlate to the standoffs here, here, and here. So you just want to line it up with those. And then once it's roughly in place, go ahead and take your anchoring screws and you can re-anchor them into the board. Make sure they're nice and snug, and that should be good to go. And then gently just kind of hold this over here. You want to make sure you don't put too much tension on this ribbon cable, and then you can gently just put back in this battery connector by just feeding it back into this tri-slot here. Gently feed it in, take two of your fingernails and press on the side and you should be good to go. Now, one benefit of putting this in early is that it makes it very easy to test this unit. So go ahead, flip the unit on, make sure everything is still functional, test your side buttons, test your main clicks, test your scroll wheel, make sure everything is functioning before you put the unit back together. If for whatever reason your little side buttons aren't working, it's most likely because this ribbon cable isn't seated. If it's not seated properly, I would recommend taking this out, reseat this cable, and then putting it back in, just because it's next to impossible to get this cable back in here with this battery cage on this. But if you tested your unit and everything functions okay, you can go ahead and turn the unit back off again, and we can go ahead and work on the top shell next. All right, now for the main shell, this is going to be pretty straightforward. See these bottom holes here and here? You need these bottom holes to hold the two little standoffs that are right here and here. So how you do this is you just want to flip the unit over like this, hold the clicks like this, and you want to just gently kind of push the shells together. And then you want to make sure that you can push these up high enough where they're going to make proper contact, which can be a little finicky sometimes. You may have to push them in a little bit, but see how that one's made proper contact. You may have to push this one up as well, just like that. And then once these are in the bottom connector, they're like that. Again, you don't want this to go into the top one because that'll ruin the main clicks. You want to go into the bottom one. And once they're roughly lined up, just like this, you can go ahead and push back on the bottom to clip the clicks back into place, and you can verify they've made contact by seeing how this is all flush like this. Again, you can take your finger and just press there to make sure they go in, but that should fix that problem. And then we can go ahead and put back in our main clicks. Very, very easy as per usual with most main clicks. We're just going to gently put them into the side of the board just like this, and then once they're in the side, we just press down here and press down here, and that anchors our main clicks back into the shell. All right, now we have the fun part of getting this into here. Now this is going to be pretty tricky, so just bear with me here, but this is much easier than trying to put this in and then get this cable into the side thing, because it's nearly impossible. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take this side button cable and we're going to rotate the cable so it goes like this, so that way when we install it into the shell, it's going to roll over like this. Again, bear with me, I know this is kind of sketchy, but just bear with me for this one. So you're going to have to kind of tilt it like this, and then you just want to make sure you can put this side button PCB back into its spot without straining this cable too much. Now once you get it into place, it might be worth it for you to flip the unit over on this side like this, and then once you get it roughly in, you can go ahead and take your anchoring screws and anchor this in. Again, just try and be really careful. Try not to put too much pressure onto this ribbon cable unless you absolutely have to, because it is very, very gentle. As you can see here, it's already giving me a little bit of grief with how I'm doing this, but it's all good. And then once that's kind of roughly seated in, and you can make sure that these are in by these two contacts here and here, you can go ahead and put in your anchoring screws. And once that's done, that's pretty much everything there. Now, before you put the shell together, what I recommend doing is just taking the unit like this and just verify that your side clicks actually still work. If you want, flip the unit on and just make sure the side clicks are functioning on your computer. Again, if they function when you tested them earlier, they should be fine. The only issues you may have is if this isn't seated properly, but that should not be a problem. But once you've verified they are functional, you're good to go. And then we can go ahead and put the unit back together. Now, this is going to be pretty easy as the shells just literally just kind of clip together just like this. So just roughly line up the shells like this and press down. Run your finger along the base just to make sure everything is made contact. And once that's done, you can go ahead and put back in your base anchoring screws. Alrighty, and then once those screws are in, you can go ahead and just verify the bottom shell has made contact. If it has, you're good to go. And then we can go replace our back shell here, and that is everything. You've successfully taken apart and reassembled the FANTECH Aria V1. Overall, a pretty serviceable mouse, a little tricky in terms of how you have to put it back together, but overall a pretty serviceable mouse for a mouse like this. I know commonly these eggshell mice are a little tricky to take apart and put back together, but the FANTECH one is actually surprisingly serviceable and pretty easy to disassemble and reassemble if necessary. I also love the fact that there's actually space on the inside to mod in a bigger battery. That is a really awesome thing to see. Again, this unit weighing in around 59 grams stock, maybe you don't necessarily want to put in a bigger battery, but it's still nice to see that option. And I now see how the great serviceability of the FANTECH Helios Pro 2S came about, because the Aria is actually a pretty serviceable unit across the board. But that's going to be everything for today's episode of Teardown. Thank you very much for watching as always. If you found this teardown guide helpful and want to see more FANTECH mice taken apart like this, as well as a bunch of other mice here on the channel, be sure to leave a like on this video and get subscribed so you don't miss any future teardown videos. Thank you very much to our channel members, Yuki89, Prince, It Was Luck, and Lunaris. Thank you very much for your support. If you'd like to support what I'm doing here on the channel with the in-depth reviews and of course the Teardown project, you can become a member here on YouTube. It is only $2 Canadian, and that is the best way to directly support the channel. You can also use code MELON with a 0 over at MetKeys, Lethal Gaming Gear, Potent Gaming, and TJ Exclusives to save yourselves a couple dollars off your orders and help directly support the channel. But that's everything for today's episode of Teardown. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next episode. Peace.